With the last dropping leaves, many Great Lakes fishermen's minds turn to thoughts of silver. The days of leaping, bounding, silver streaks are upon us. The steelhead has arrived. Also, with this season comes cold, clear, low water conditions on most of the tributaries. Here, under these circumstances, are where the float fishermen will excel and put to good use the specialized and deadly technique. With us today is Mike Durkalek. Mike has been an avid float fisherman and centerpin fisherman for well over 10 years, and we've asked him to give us a general overview about what float fishing is and to explain some of the techniques and equipment. So if you would, Mike, what do we need to know about specifically the history of it?
All right, well, just to backtrack a little, Eric, today we're going to be going over a very specific method of float fishing using a centerpin reel, specialized rod, and some of these specialized floats in front of us. Just a very effective way of presenting bait or fly or other offering suspended mainly for river fishing. To go a little bit into the history, float fishing originated over in Europe, specifically England to the best of my knowledge. Came over into North America probably about 15 years or so ago. Started out probably in British Columbia and Ontario and sort of has spread its way to the States and mainly in recent years. It's really just starting to get popular for Great Lakes steelhead probably in the last few years. Brings up the question, what is a centerpin reel?
That was my first question too.
Right.
What makes actually a centerpin reel different than, because this looks like a fly reel that you can get anywhere.
Right. The main difference is a centerpin reel uses either bearings or bushing so that the spool spins freely with little or no drag whatsoever. Okay. And we'll go into on the river a little bit more as to why that's such an advantage.
Okay.
You can use a spinning reel for float fishing. You can probably use, well, they do use bait casting reels.
Mm-hmm.
A few reasons this reel is so effective is just the free spinning spool is really the key of it.
Okay.
Once your float and your offering gets out in the current, it pretty much just plays it out at a very even, dead drift type of speed.
Can you tell us a little bit about what makes a float rod so special? I know we brought a good variety here, but what do you look for in a float rod when you're trying to choose one for yourself?
It's a good question, Eric. These rods actually are similar to noodle rods except for a few differences that make them distinct. Float rods tend to be, I would characterize them as a light, moderate action, just a little bit more backbone than a noodle rod. So you're setting a hook with a float, a bunch of shot. You need a pretty good rod, a lot of backbone to really get a direct connection for the hook set. And the extended length, the standard for float rods is about 13 foot. And the reason for that extra length is for keeping your line off the water during your drift, and so that you can manipulate and control your drift more effectively.
Why don't you tell me a little bit about the different types of lines? I mean, what's a desirable line to use? What are you looking for? Because I know there's a ton of choices out there.
Some lines definitely are better suited to float fishing than others. In general, at least this is not leader material, your main line. Any line that's going to be ahead of the float between the reel and the float itself, you don't want a sinking line or a fast sinking line like a fluorocarbon. That's a denser line, it's known for sinking. A floating line like this SIG line, it's a very specialized line, that's a good one because it doesn't actually sink, it just stays on the surface film or near the surface film, and when you go to set the hook, there's no extra resistance there.
Okay.
That's a little pricey though. A cheaper alternative would be to buy an Andy is a good one. It's kind of a harder line with not as much memory as some other ones. That's a good characteristic with float reels. They tend to get, these reels tend to get line twist from time to time. But what you can do to make this type of line float is actually put a little silicone floating on maybe the first 20, 30 feet of the line.
Same stuff you use for
dry flies,
fishing?
yeah. Put it on the night before, let it dry, and it actually works pretty well. It's not totally necessary, but it does help sometimes.
So that's just a regular monofilament?
Regular monofilament. A hard mono with low memory is a good line for this. Andy, Trilene XL is a good one. Even Maximum would probably be decent.
Okay. I know as a beginner you get very confused about the floats.
Yeah, there's a lot of choices.
It is called float fishing, centerpin fishing.
Sure.
If you were just starting off, you know, instead of looking at a wall of 100 floats, is there 2 or 3 that the beginner could pick up and be pretty much set with in varying conditions?
Definitely. The shape and size of the float really does make a big difference on the drift that you're going to be presenting. As a real general rule of thumb with floats, the more substantial, the more body of your float, like some of these ones over here, This is actually a very common and widely available float made by Blackbird. Very substantial body, good for fast, choppier water. The buoyant body of that float doesn't allow it to go under as often when, say, you do drag bottom or hit a rock.
Okay.
So the trade-off is sensitivity, but it's more buoyant.
All right.
Moving your way this way, you're getting more into some of the stick floats, the stick-style floats. This particular one is made by Till. This is good for low water. It's slimmer, it's less resistance for the fish to pull it down. But in faster water, something like this would be going under constantly every time it hit a rock.
Okay.
This one's good for slower water, more delicate presentation, deeper, slower pools. And a good, actually, probably a very good all-around float. Till makes this one they call the Turbo Master. A substantial body, yet not so wide that you can't use it in slower water effectively. The wire stem is very hydrodynamic, actually very good float for beginners, and these are very widely available.
You can find those at any...
A lot of good tackle shops at least that specialize in steelhead or Great Lakes fishing gear.
Okay.
All these floats, the most commonly they attach using silicone or rubber tubing. Just have some examples here. You can buy it specifically for that purpose, or you can just buy it at some hobby shops. It's cheaper. But basically these floats attach, the line passes through the surgical tubing on the top and the bottom, and it's fixed at 2 points to the line. The nice thing about that is it slides up and down the line for depth adjustment easily, and also better control over the float having it attached to 2 different places. You can pretty much present anything, any type of bait, any type of fly can be used under a float. Basically, just have some examples, just some general egg patterns, nymphs, whatever, or else we have just your general spawn sack or night crawler on a hook with some split shot.
Okay.
But we'll get into some keys of the actual shotting patterns, the differences in how you place those split shot on your leader, how that affects your drift when we're on the river here in a little bit.
Can I use what I have now, or do I have to go out and buy all new stuff for float fishing?
No, not really, Eric. Basically, you use float fishing to present just about any fly or bait you would use with other types of conventional gear. It's just a very controlled and effective way to present it. Basically, we just have our leader, our offering, and various amounts of split shot. And the way you put those split shot on the line has a lot of effect over the behavior of your drift.
Okay.
And we'll go over that in a little bit here on the river.
All right, so I can use the flies I have in my box or the spawn I use on a bobber rod, or even a night crawler if you want to.
That's not affected in any way. It's just the manner in which it's presented.
Well, I'll tell you what, why don't you show me how to put this together, and we'll go throw the boots on and hopefully catch a few fish too.
Let's go get it. We'll go ahead and go over the basic rigging. Got a basic balsa float here. As we mentioned earlier, it's connected with 2 rubber or silicone sleeves on each end of the float. Go ahead and take the first one off, the top one off first. Run your line through it, of course. Attach it to the top of the float. You want to make sure the silicone sleeves you put on fit pretty snug too, or your float's going to be sliding all over. One of the good advantages of using these silicone sleeves to fix your float is when you change holes or types of water, it's real easy to adjust the float. Just slide it up or down based on water depth. There's really nothing beyond the tension that's holding it in place. Now this next part is a matter of personal preference, I guess. Fixing the leader to the main line. I'm going to use a small size 20 ant swivel. Some guys use a surgeon knot, blood knot, whatever you prefer.
Now they actually make micro swivels for this, right?
Right.
Blackbird makes them, very, very small.
Blackbird makes them. Actually, you can get them through Cabela's. This is just a size 20 swivel from Cabela's. But yeah, there's some more specialized.
So you can get as specialized as you want into this, or just use what you can find locally.
Right, definitely. I just find using a swivel a little easier to change leader than say tying a blood knot or surgeon's knot. Now we mentioned earlier we don't like to use fluorocarbon as our main line. Of course that's okay for your leader material. One other, I guess, useful aspect of this, using the swivel to fix your leader, if you're using a main line, as a general rule, 2 pounds heavier than your leader, and you're actually connected the leader below the float, as you know, these floats aren't always cheap. Nice thing is you can often break off your leader if you get a snag or even break off a fish and you don't lose your float.
And at $2 or $3 a piece, that can be a very expensive day.
For us working men.
That's right. Okay, so you've got the main line, the float, the barrel swivel, and then the hook.
Hook, fly, whatever you want to use.
Okay.
Go ahead and pop that on there. As a general rule, I use my leader maybe 2 foot or so, but you know, that's going to vary based on the depth of the water. You obviously don't want a leader longer than the depth of a lot of the runs you're going to be fishing, or you're going to have a hard time adjusting the float, of course, beyond the swivel.
Right.
And as far as the shotting goes, we have a variety of size split shot. Most float fishermen like to what they call stagger the split shot, which means space them out more or less evenly on your leader and line below the float. Starting with the larger shot towards the float, here using about a BB, a couple of those, progressively going smaller so that you get a more natural drift and less likelihood of snagging when you get towards your actual offering.
Okay.
Go down a size from there, a couple size 4. And ideally, and this is something you can play with on the stream, of course, but you generally want just about enough shot that that float is balanced, so it's pretty much ready to go under. If you have this float in the water and it's riding about so high in the water level, you probably don't have enough shot on.
Okay.
You want it so it's pretty flush, pretty close to the surface of the water, so it really doesn't take much more than a fish mouthing your bait to make it go under, or at least make it move.
And I would assume that that's especially critical once the water gets colder, slower water, and the fish don't aggressively take your offering.
Definitely the case.
Okay.
So, and once again, you just you can play with the actual amount of shot you're using and the placement of them when you're on the stream. But in general, we have them here, a number of them spaced maybe anywhere from, 2 to 4 inches apart going down the line. Okay. An idea with staggering, having them going all the way down the line is you're spending less time waiting for the offering to get down to the deeper water. You have a more direct connection by having them spread out, and it just drops down into your strike zone a lot quicker.
Now, would you use this shotting pattern for faster water, riffle water, and slower water?
The staggered shot is a good all-around shotting pattern, but a real good rule of thumb in fishing faster runs is we call clustering the shot, or putting all your shot closer to the hook. And the reason for that is all that localized weight helps really punch your bait and offering down through the faster upper layers of the water and gets you down quicker and keeps you down easier.
But the preferred method would be to stagger your shot.
90% of the time I use staggered shot.
Okay.
So I think we're ready here. Ready to go get us a few fish?
Great, why don't you show me how to do this? Mike, now that we've went over the history of the Centerpin, the rods and reels, the terminal tackle, let's get to the meat and potatoes. How do you cast one of these? What makes it so different and hard to learn?
That's also probably the most difficult part of using float gear. What we have, it looks like a fly reel, as we pointed out earlier. It's on bearings though, so it spins freely. And unlike a fly reel also, we have a groove in here which allows the line to come off the side of the reel. And that's important based on the technique you need to use to cast this reel. The easiest, most straightforward way, just run the line over a couple of your fingers, holding it off to the side. And I'm using, as you can see, my pinky on the reel to kind of break the line. Set back, cast, let it run off, and you just kind of use your pinky or your hand to stop the line from running as well. Really not much to it. One problem you'll have if you only use the side cast is eventually you will get some line kinking from coming off the side of the spool.
Okay.
And one step further, once you've actually mastered this just basic side cast, which is easy, it becomes easy, you can add one additional technique to minimize your line twist, and that is to get the spool spinning as you let the line off the side of the reel. Sounds easier than it actually is. So grip the line immediately behind the reel, give it a tug to get it spinning, and immediately come off the side just as in the side cast.
Okay.
So I would probably recommend for somebody just learning how to use one of these, get comfortable with the fixed side cast first. And after you feel like you're getting that down and getting some good control, try the one spinning side cast.
And that just minimizes the line twist,
Yeah,
but it's still going to occur.
Correct.
Okay.
And the best thing I can tell you as far as that's concerned is maybe every other trip, just peel 30, 50 feet of line off. Generally, when float fishing, you're at your best position to be slightly upstream of the drift you want to actually work.
Okay.
And the reason for that, as you'll see here in a moment, cast her out. Watch the reel here. It takes the line evenly off the spool, basically at current speed. If you need to slow down a little bit, you just use your your pinky as a brake. And one thing to keep in mind, sometimes it may look like the float's going a little slower than the current. That may be true with the surface current, but surface currents are almost always faster than the currents down near the river bottom due to turbulence, obstructions, and all that. So ideally, we want to have our presentation going at current speed towards the bottom, and this reel really excels at doing that naturally. You'll notice a lot of my control of the drift is just with one finger, and that includes the hook set. If that floats to go down, just use this as a brake and set back in one quick motion.
There he is.
Okay.
All right.
Bringing the line in, just a couple quick spins of the spool.
Now what about rod position? I'm assuming you want to keep as much line off of the river surface as possible.
Definitely. And you don't want to be almost straight up and down. Obviously, it's tough to do the hook set, but I'd say definitely a little above 45 degrees on average. About where I'm at here. Just a nice even drift. The line comes right off the spool. And a beautiful thing with these center pins is you can just get one long, smooth, continuous drift.
Now, is there better water to run this style of fishing in? Faster, slower, pocket water versus long runs?
Right. You really can float fish just about any type of water. Float fish, you know, is really most at home in moderate to slower pools. It's really good for working current seams like one we have right out in front of us here. And you can work fast, shallow water too, but the advantages over fly fishing in that situation are really negligible at that point. You get it cast out. If you place your float up on the seam, the reel basically just takes it down along the seam naturally. Not a whole lot of work involved. One thing you can definitely learn from watching your float during the drift is just the position the float's facing is certainly going to be an indicator of where your bait is. If you have the float pointed, the top stem of the float pointed downstream, you're going to be dragging the bottom in that situation. You're better off with it being straight up and down, or the top of the stem pointing upstream. It means your bait's swinging out ahead. Here's where the fun begins.
Is this the payoff that you've been telling me about all day?
Yep. Now, as we mentioned earlier, these reels don't have a functional drag except your hand. You can palm it, but I prefer to just use a finger or two here to add a little tension to the line. And basically, it's a pretty smooth way to use it as a drag. That's a decent fish, huh? But nice thing about these 13-foot rods, another advantage, in addition to keeping your line off the water and controlling your drift, they're wonderful for controlling fish as well. Yeah, I could use a hand.
That'd be a good
Let's
idea.
go ahead and get this guy in. Oh,
I
jump!
don't think he's quite ready yet.
Go ahead and lock this guy to shore.
Yeah, we got him right here.
Try not to grab the leader there. You can help it.
Oh, there he goes.
There he goes. Thank you.
Good fish.
Try and get another one.
I just looked up and there was a fish there. Oh no.
Mike, can you show us how to properly rig up a rod?
Sure, Eric. Glad you asked. I can listen.
All right. Mike, can you show... You're going to say something smart again, aren't you?
I say nothing.
Okay.
Into some of the more
Yeah.
maybe more coffee.
All right.
Look like it's going down at the speed of the current. It doesn't mean it's not dragging your offering, and that's obviously not a dead drift. Nice helicopter. Yeah,
We'll catch a fish or two.
let's do it.
Great.
All right,
Oh my
hold on. Don't
God,
go
can we go fishing now, please?
No.
Your line off the water during your drift,
Okay.
and so that you can manipulate and control your drift more effectively.
Which is key in Centerpin.
You probably cut that last part
That's
out.
fine. We can cut that out.
There you go, there's Brian, first blooper.
What's that? And everything. Went past the barb. Thanks, Eric. I'd say solid 15 pounds. We didn't mention earlier, I'm 8 feet tall.